if you found yourself out of favor, man, your life was legitimately in jeopardy. And so whether you agree that you're in danger or not, whether you agree with the reason, it doesn't matter. You come out to the yard, they're going to whack you.
What's up, everybody? I'm Blessed and Free. Welcome back to another episode of DOC TV. So you guys already know what it is. On this channel, I bring people on that have been to prison to get different perspectives. And I'm really curious about this one. It's another interview out in Cali, and California prison system is run totally different than the Florida prison system. We're going to get into that in today's episode. If you're new and you're tuning in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn your post notifications on so every time I drop an episode, you can hear it first. So, man, let's go ahead and jump into this. Just introduce yourself to the people that may not know who you are. Just tell them your name and where you're from.
Sure. So I go by the homie Joshua, homie being an acronym for helping others move in excellence. So kind of a play on words. And I'm from the Bay Area, California.
All right, man. So your name's Josh, then I take it.
Yeah, my name's Josh.
You got two Joshes on the channel today.
We do.
Special. Yeah. All right, man. Well, so tell the people what it was like for you growing up.
It was fairly traumatic, right? To put it mildly. You know, there was a lot of abandonment. There was just a lot of struggle. My family was divided. My mom was very young, and she kind of had her own stuff going on. She was trying to figure out how to be a young adult while at the same time, you know, having me. And so I bounced around a lot and didn't really have a stable place, so to speak, right? And I was with my dad sometimes, and that was cool. But, you know, where a lot of people have daddy issues, quote unquote, I had mommy issues, right? And my mom's side of the family operates different than my dad's side. And so I found myself in the streets a lot. I found myself getting in trouble at a really young age and going to juvenile hall and group homes and programs and all kinds of stuff.
It's crazy, man. Like, I interview a lot of people, and I feel like I hear my story in increments in everybody that I interview, because it feels like, man, a lot of people that are either addicted to drugs, been to prison, you know, grew up like we grew up. When you were going through that and you're getting in trouble, do you think you were getting in trouble because you were like, you know, for me, I was like, I liked the chaos. You know what I'm saying? What was your like reason for start getting in trouble and doing the wrong thing in life?
Sure. Part of it was just influence, right? And nobody was coming to me telling me to be a criminal, right? Nobody was coming to me telling me to be a gang member. It's just when you're out in the streets, you know, you wind up, especially at a young age, kind of adapting and adopting to the norms of the streets. Not necessarily intentionally, not consciously knowing what you're doing, so to speak, just adjusting and taking on the characteristics of your environment. And I didn't have a lot of leadership. I didn't have a lot of guidance. And so I got that in the streets. You know, as the saying goes, if you're not going to parent your kids, the streets will, right? And so that's what happened. And what attracted me was the community, right? That sense of belonging, the love, the support, the respect. You know, I wasn't the biggest, baddest, toughest guy. I wasn't the most sophisticated criminal, right? But I was safe pretty much anywhere I went. And not that we didn't get any problems, but, you know, I wound up having a lot of friends, going to juvenile hall and going to these placements when I was young. I got to meet lots of people from different neighborhoods in terms of gang stuff, so to speak. My affiliation stretches throughout Northern California, right? And so people can be from different neighborhoods, but they sort of fall under that same generic identity of being a Northerner or a Norteño, right? And so meeting Norteños from other neighborhoods and then being able to get out and go over there and kick it with them. And I found my calling, so to speak, or so I thought.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, when you like get arrested. And then by the third time you get arrested and you get locked up or go into prison or a program, you already know half the block when you walk in, because it's like the same group. It's like a reunion, bro.
Exactly. I made some very good friends that I rarely ever saw outside of custody settings, you know, but over the course of 5 years, you know, we spent a lot of time together in different places. And it was refreshing to see that, right? It was comforting. As odd as it seems.
I'm assuming then you're a Northerner.
Yes.
Like, when did you get down for the set and everything?
this is back, you got to figure I'm 44, right? So this is late 80s, right? And so a lot of the like jumping in, getting beaten, and some of the stuff that became more popular later wasn't huge back then. It was more about your presence and being around. And as situations came up, did you demonstrate that you were a person of character according to the streets, right? And so actually the first time I was called a gang member, the first time I was called a norteño was by a cop. And I think I was 9, somewhere around there, right? I didn't see myself as a gang member. I just hung out with my friends, right? I hung out with my friends and I dressed like my friends did. And I had lots of friends that were very similar. And that was about as complicated as it was for me. You know, if I'm out with my friends and they don't get along with somebody, then I don't get along with them either, right? And so it was more like a gradual process than a, hey, one day I'm this square civilian and then the next day I'm a, you know, red belt having gang member.
It's crazy, man, because like what you described is like how it was to grow up back in the day. You know what I mean? Like you just got a couple homeboys. You don't even need to say you're a gang, you know what I mean? But like what you say, you go out, one of your homeboys gets in a fight, you best believe we're all jumping in.
Right.
And nowadays it just isn't like that. I mean, they're just shooting bitches now, but.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So when did it go to the next level for you as far as like, you know, you being in the gang structure and like putting in work and all that kind of stuff?
Well, there's lots of violence as a juvenile, right? And most of it was, I don't want to say random, but it wasn't, you know, plotted and planned out and everything else. That stuff would happen sometimes, but for the most part, you're just kind of living your life, right? And I think the movies sometimes make the gang life seem a little more glamorous than it is. We were hungry, you know, and myself and the folks I was around, we didn't get sucked into the big money culture. And so, like, I watched crack hit the Bay Area, and it made, you know, folks in poverty millionaires overnight in a lot of places. And so there's certain groups of people that were really after that money, right? And very materialistic. But then there's others of us that we were just hood dudes. You know what I mean? We're just neighborhood guys, barrio cats. And so, you know, we dressed in low income clothing, right? And Dickies and work clothes, you know, and cheap shoes, right? A pair of Cortezes back then cost you like $7, you know what I mean? So we weren't flashy. We were sharp, if I say so myself, but so life was just life. You know, you're living in a hotel, you got to pay $220 a week back then. And so it comes time to pay the money and you go out and figure out a way to get $220, you know? And so we tried to eat and drink and there was some hustling and that sort of stuff and some stealing and thieving. And we just sort of wandered, you know, we wandered around and violence came with that, right? Shootings came with that, stabbings came with that. I've been stabbed, I've shot people and, you know, getting in fights. I got beat up sometimes, I got jumped, I got busted in the head. You know, you don't win every one of them. And that was just sort of part of life. You every day was somewhat unpredictable. And you tried to make the best of it.
When did that turn into like, now I'm catching charges that are going to land me in prison?
Yeah. So at 19, I caught a case for attempted murder. I shot a guy in the neck in front of a house party. And so.
Damn, dog. Hold on one sec. So tell the people how that went down, because that's not your ordinary, you know, crime.
Right. So I don't know. It's kind of normal for us, but
there's levels to this shit. There's levels.
Right. I guess it's all perspective. But so long story short, man, there was a guy that had gotten out of the youth authority and he pulled up to my homeboy's house and I wasn't there. The few of us that would have really dealt with this situation differently in the moment, we're no longer there. We left. And so this guy gets disrespectful. My homeboy comes out the house with a pistol and he's loading a revolver, talking about, hey, man, you just need to leave. And he's trying to intimidate him with the gun. And he wasn't going to shoot nobody. And this guy knew it. And so he called him out. What you going to do with that? Right? And homeboy broke it down. Like, man, come on, man, just go. And so the guy winds up leaving, but then word starts traveling and he's, you know, whispering in the streets and F this guy and F his homeboys and F him and they're all punks and they're all this. And so there's a couple of us that were like, wait a minute, like you barking up the wrong tree. You know what I'm saying? You punked him. But that's not, you know, not all of us are cut from that cloth. And so we were actually looking for him for a long time. And then we were looking for him for a long time and couldn't find him. We turn around and we're going to this house party that I didn't even want to go to. And he says, you know, one of the girls in the car says, hey, that's that guy you've been looking for. And I said, what? One thing leads to another. I shoot him. I was aiming for his mouth because I was kind of a symbolism person. And so I think talking shit.
Bro, you're killing me.
But I missed, right? Obviously. And so missed, hit his vocal box, went back and hit his spinal cord. So he's paralyzed. And I drove away, right? As things happen a lot of times in the streets, of all the people who witnessed it, there was over 200 witnesses. The only person that identified me was the homeboy who was at the house, and all this originally happened around him getting punked. And so he got picked up for it. He didn't have anything to do with it, but he got picked up for it because there was a police report from before. It's kind of a long, drawn out thing. And he was telling on me before he got to the police station. And I didn't know that at the time. And I actually turned myself in for the crime, right? The police said they wanted to interview me. The guy's family got at me and said, hey, man, the cops want to talk to you. And I was thinking to myself, you know, this is a good kid. He comes from a middle class, you know, background and family. We would kick it in front of his house because it was off the beaten path, right? And his parents were cool. So it's kind of like a safe place for us to just hang out and get away from the dramas of the streets. And so I said, I've done a bunch of time. It's inevitable that I'm going to go to prison anyways. Let me go ahead. You know, it's not cool for him to take the charge for me. I'd taken charges as a kid for other people, but I wasn't going to put that on him. I didn't know at the time that he was telling and I was going to get arrested anyways.
So that story is a good story for the people watching, because that right there is what happens when a young man joins a gang. You would have never shot that dude if he didn't bitch up your homeboy, which led to the whole shit going down. Exactly. And I think it's good for, you know, young people that are watching to hear this. So I just want to put that out there. Go ahead.
No, and I think it's a great point. And to kind of piggyback off that real quick, you know, I talk to a lot of people and I work with a lot of youngsters and dudes coming home from prison and, oh, this guy's solid and this guy's this and no, this guy's trustworthy. And everybody's solid until the moment that they're not, right? And I've seen serial killers that have given everything for their homeboys decide one day that they're done and spill the beans on everything they know. And I've seen the biggest hustlers and the biggest money makers and the biggest everything. The moment they get those handcuffs on them, they turn into a poodle and everything changes. So this whole notion of that happens to other people, but it'll never happen to me is very foolish for anybody to think that they are the exception because you never know.
Yeah, it's the same shit with snitches, bro. Like everybody hates a snitch, but they've never been in the detective room facing 30 years. You know what I'm saying? So, and if, you know, if you haven't been given that opportunity, then you, in my eyes, you have no right to call someone a snitch because you ain't living like that. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, they may have failed the test, but you never even took it. So
exactly, bro. That's a good way to put it, man.
Yeah.
So when you did that and you turned yourself in and the kids, like, you know, your homeboys telling on you, how did you find out that he was telling on you the whole time?
I had an idea when I went into the police station, right? Because I went in and I said, hey, you know, I heard you guys want to talk to me. I ain't really got nothing to say, but I hear you're looking for me. Here I am. Yeah, man, we want to talk to you about this shooting that happened over here. And I was like, I don't know. Were you there? No, man. I think I went by there at one point, but I don't know nothing about a shooting, right? And I'm kind of gauging what's going on. They knew everything. They knew who was in my car. They knew who was in the car behind me, who was in the car in front of me, who was 3 cars back, who I talked to when I first went there, how many times I went around the block checking to see if there was cops, why I shot the dude. Like, they knew everything. And there's no way, right, that they could know that much unless someone's telling. And everything that they knew, because it wasn't just about that night. It was about stuff that happened prior. It was about the time spent in between. There's only 2 people that could have known all that information. One of them is the dude who got punked, and the other one's my brother, right? And it wasn't my brother. And so I was like, that's, you know, then I knew. And at that point, I was like, look, man, I did it. And they said, okay, you know, were these people in the car with you? I was like, nobody was in the car with me. Well, we've heard that they're in the car with you. I said, look, you want somebody for the shooting. You got me for the shooting. I shot the dude. Let's leave it at that, right? It's nothing else matters. Nobody else matters. You want the shooter? I'm the shooter. There you go. I ain't got nothing else to say besides that. Yes, I did it. I did everything you think I did. I don't got nothing to say about nothing else.
Did they take you to trial or you just pled out?
No, I pled out. I took a 10-year deal. There was no way I was going to win that trial. You know what I mean?
I mean, 10 years, that's a long time, but for like, especially when the victim lives and then they're paralyzed, because then that plays on the sentencing. So, I mean.
Yeah, and I was threatened with, because the victim was in a hospital when I got sentenced, right? And so it was made very clear to me that if he dies within 365 days of the day that I shot him, they're going to bring me back on murder charges.
Yeah, capital murder.
And so, yeah. And so he didn't die. And he was, at first, he was paralyzed, everything. And now, from what I hear, he's just paralyzed from the waist up. Not to minimize the trauma to him, right? But he's healed somewhat over these years. That was back in 96, so.
Okay, so you then had to do 10 years in the California prison system.
Yes.
Which is, that can't be easy, bro. I've heard a lot of people, I've had people on this channel that have done time. So tell the people, man, what was it like going into the California prison system?
Sure. So, and I mean, I could talk all day about kind of the particulars and the emotions and this and that, but it'd have to be a 10-part series, right? And so,
just tell the people, like, your first month, how does it go for somebody like you going into prison? What to expect?
Right. So the gist of it is, California prison system is driven strongly by politics. It's driven strongly by affiliation. And so I'm labeled as a Northern Mexican, right? Which falls under the umbrella of Norteños and NF and, everybody else. And so I go in there and there's already an established household, so to speak, of my folks, right? I don't know them, but they're there and we claim the same thing. So I'm embraced immediately, especially because I'm a first termer. So I don't have a history. I don't have a lot to explain about my background, right? It's pretty cut and dry. And so you're embraced, but there's different ways to do your time. And it kind of depends on the level of prison you go to. And it depends on the type of personality that you have. Some people are just torpedoes, right? They're so eager to prove themselves and prove that they're violent and they're willing to do anything. And there's a lot of more seasoned folks, or a lot of folks in leadership, that will certainly take advantage of that. Just go. Let
me ask you this, man. So with that being said about what you're saying, you've done 10 years in prison. You've met a lot of different people. What would you say is the percentage of people that go to prison and actually are fucking warriors and they win all their fights and all that shit? What would you say that percentage is that you saw?
It's a fraction. Now, there's a lot of killers in there, right? And there's a lot of people that'll move on you. So one-on-one fights, in terms of with Northerners and with some other groups too, the idea of a one-on-one fight just doesn't happen, right? Like it's not as if me and you get in an argument and we just go in a cell and take a fade, right? Because that's going to lead to, especially if you're a part of another group, that's going to lead to a war, no matter what the outcome of that fight is. It's nobody would allow that, right? So
you can't fight. You have to get approval.
Yeah, you can't just this whole idea of get off where you're mad at. It doesn't work that way, right? There are certain seasons and certain places where that might be the case, where you're actively engaged in battle with folks. So in that case, yes, anytime you encounter them, get off, right? But for the most part, most of the time, and even those seasons don't generally last a long time. The yard gets shut down, people get stabbed, you come off lockdown, people get stabbed again. And pretty soon now people are getting shipped out and transferred and moved, and other folks are coming to replace them. And so it's all very political. It's all very organized. Some groups are more organized than others. I think, without putting anybody down, of course, I think that, the folks that I ran with are widely considered by just about anybody that's done time in California as running the strictest program. And so there's lots of schooling, there's lots of education. I was reading all the time. I was writing 10,000 word essays. I became a teacher in there. So I was handing out basically homework assignments. It's school. It's school. And then it's weaponry training, and it's hustle, and it's constantly observing every other group and observing everything that's going on around you. And some of that stuff also makes you vulnerable because some people don't like that, and they wind up not being able to continue in that lifestyle and dropping out and telling. I think we run the strictest program, but we also probably have the highest rate of dropouts and defectors of any group as well.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's for a few reasons, and it didn't used to be that way, but there's become people in leadership that shouldn't be in leadership in some places. And so the abuse, the taking advantage of those who get a little status, take advantage of the guy fresh off the streets who doesn't aspire to have that status, just kind of wants to function with the homeboys and do what's asked, but not do anything extra, not, go any further than necessary, right? And those people get abused. And people that do want to climb the ladder get abused on the way up there sometimes. Not always, of course. There's these conceptually beautiful aspects to this movement and this cause and this fight for liberation and this fight for unity and this fight against oppressors and all this stuff, right? There's no talk of gangs. There's no talk of that stuff, right? It's advancing a movement and advancing a cause. But on another level, it's hyper-capitalist, right? And it's run by egomaniacs. Just like if you think about whoever runs for president has a huge ego in the country.
Yeah, it's the same way with the world, man. You can go work for a corporation, and it's the same shit.
Right.
Except
and so
in your world, they'll fucking kill you.
Exactly. And that's the thing. The stakes are high, right? It's a very high stakes game, and people get tired of that, or they find themselves on the short end of the stick. And if you find yourself out of favor, there was a time, it's becoming increasingly less like this, but there was a time, if you found yourself out of favor, man, your life was legitimately in jeopardy. And so whether you agree that you're in danger or not, whether you agree with the reason, it doesn't matter. You come out to the yard, they're going to whack you. And so when you're put in that situation, what do? You have two options, right? 3, you go out to the yard, try to get off on somebody before they whack you, probably still get whacked, and then you're really in trouble. Or you go to the cops and say, hey, I'm not safe here anymore. And they say, okay, well, tell on folks and we'll move you over here.
Out of your whole time gangbanging, man, did you ever have thoughts in your head, like personally, like, man, I just don't want to do this anymore? It's not because you wanted to tell or like the way you make it sound, man, is that the leaders above in the gang are working their foot soldiers and making them do such crazy shit that they're not built for it. But like, you got to have a break, man. Like, you got to be able to, self-reflect. And when you're always doing shit for other people, you can't do that.
No, great point. So I wound up getting validated, right? I got validated as a Northern Structure, Nuestra Raza, member. And so, which is kind of the go-between between your Northerners and the NF, right? And so I got validated back then. When you get validated, you go to the SHU for the remainder of your time, or until you die, or until you tell. Now things are different. And so I did about half my time in the SHU, and some of it in the Corcoran SHU, most of it in the Pelican Bay SHU. That's where I paroled from in December 2005. And while I was sitting in the Bay and sitting in the SHU, I never dropped out. I never debriefed. I never walked away. But I did start considering, especially as my release date came close, because I did my time as if I had no date, right? But I did. And now here it comes. And I'm damn near 30 years old. What am I going to do? I've been around enough and seen enough. I know how this ends if I continue to ride this out in the streets, right? Everybody either gets indicted or gets whacked or drops out. None of those things sound great to me, right? And so I'm not going to be the exception. There are no exceptions. There's never been an exception. I'm not going to be the first. And maybe this is not all that I was led to believe that it was. There are individuals who stand by that. There is the potential for that. Practically speaking,
reality.
Yeah. If to continue in this lane, I'd have to be a different person than what I actually committed to being while I was in prison, right? If that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense.
I committed to middle management thinking that upper management was just a really good version of middle management. And in reality, you know, you go from blue collar to white collar, right? Like it's very different. And that's not what I wanted, you know, and so I had the privilege, frankly, of having a release date. And if I didn't have a release date, I'd have wrote it out. And I think a lot of people stick with it because what's their other choice?
Well, how many guys have you seen go to prison like yourself and turn into the gang life and start running their programming and everything and politicking that we're going to get out in 10 years and now we're doing life? Is that number high?
Oh, extremely. Extremely. I have a really good friend of mine. I actually did a video about him on my Corcoran video, but a very good friend, you know, a high-ranking person. He was upper management, right? But his heart and his approach and his values were different than what's become fashionable. And he came in with a county jail sentence and wound up giving a prison system over 20 years off a county jail sentence. He wasn't even set to go to prison. He had 8 months in the county and didn't leave for 20 plus years from prison. And so
that's fucking crazy.
Yeah, I've seen folks get carved up when they're a couple days to the house, you know, because they acted up. They did something wrong. Some paperwork came back on them. They're paroling in 3 days. You're going to parole from the hospital, not from here. I've seen plenty of people that were close to their release date. I've seen folks close to their release date who were told to do something, encouraged to do it, but you're not allowed to say no to an encouragement, right? So they were encouraged to do something. They declined the offer because they're close to going home, and they get whacked, right? The person they're supposed to whack still gets whacked. Somebody's going to be in line to do it. But
that doesn't make sense to me, because if you're in a gang, man, you guys are supposed to be brothers. And your brother knows your other brother is going to go home in fucking 3 days. And let's say, like, you know, no paperwork came back and it was just like, do you feel like they do that to people that are going home just because like they're inside them, they're like hating?
Sometimes, sir. And you have to remember, like, when we talk about gangs, so to speak, right? It's not as if all these folks come from the same neighborhood, the same city, the same county. They could be 100 miles away from each other in the streets, right? And so there are some communities in Northern California that have a larger percentage of Norteños than others, but there's Northerners everywhere. And so you can be in charge of a yard, yet you're in charge of people from, you know, for half the state, right? That may be represented on that yard amongst your demographic. And within that, there's nuances, right? Some people grow up in a very urban environment and they're Norteños, so they carry themselves a certain way and they talk a certain way. Others grow up in a very rural immigrant environment and they're Norteños, so they conduct themselves and talk in a different way. This little pocket of people may have come up through YA together, done time together. They got 15 plus years of knowing each other on the streets and in prison, while these people they never even heard of and they don't know. You know, so it's, when we say gang,
it's a big umbrella.
Yeah, yes, it applies, but it's you know, it's very, very similar to the Sureños, right? You can have a Sureño from San Diego. You can have a Sureño from the inner valley. You could have one from LA. Shoot, we got Sureños up north, right? And so, but they all run as Sureños in prison or Southerners in prison. You know, the folks in charge may feel some type of way towards certain people. You can't set trip directly, right? It's not in prison, but you can favor. You're not supposed to, but it happens. People are people. Right, and we don't become robots.
Can you explain to the people what set tripping is? Because some of them might not know what that is.
Sure. So set tripping in the sense of we may fall under the same overall umbrella, right? We might both be Bloods. We might both be Crips. We might both be Norteños or Sureños or whatever, but we're from different neighborhoods. And our neighborhoods don't get along, or our counties don't get along. In the streets, a lot of people are more inclined to fight with folks that are under that same umbrella, so to speak, than they are even rivals. And just because of territory and being close to each other and competition and you know, you all went to the same middle school, but then you went to different high schools and you beef with each other and that carries over into violence, whatever it may be. But you go to prison, your umbrella matters, not your neighborhood, right?
Sure.
And so you go into prison, you can't look and be like, hey, your homeboy shot my homeboy in the streets, but we're both clicked up with the same group. We might be cellies now. And is there animosity? Of course. Those feelings don't go away, right? But can we, again, like get off where you're mad at? No, right? I've seen Northerners removed by Northerners for disrespecting Southerners. I've seen Southerners remove other Southerners because they disrespected Northerners. And at that time, we're arch rivals. We're arch enemies. But in prison, it's more of a respect thing, and it's more a thing of if you let these two dudes fight because somebody fucking pissed in their coffee in the morning and they're just in a bad mood, after that fight comes the war. People are going to get stabbed. The yard's going to get locked down. There's no more dope coming into prison, no more packages, no more visits. Like life is going to be more miserable for hundreds of people because you two had a bad day. No way. Right. And so I'd rather get rid of you from my circle for acting stupid than get us in a war. And I expect the other group to do the same thing when the roles are reversed.
That's crazy, man. Because in Florida, it's just two different worlds, man. Like, yeah. So in Cali, like you guys are selling up with your race or your gang, right?
Yeah. So the way California, when I was in there, the way the racial classification, right? So racial is not supposed to be same as gang. You know, it's because there are, with the black gangs and the white gangs, there's very, 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 very little people outside those groups that run with them, right? Even if you ran with them on the streets, you don't really run with them in prison. Like if you were a white Crip in the streets because you grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, very, very rare that you're going to go to prison and run with the Crips.
So there's no white Bloods or white Crips?
I don't want to say there's none, but there's radically few, right? Like, I mean, and when I say few, I mean most yards would not have one. But I'm sure that they're sprinkled somewhere here and there.
Right. Why is that? Is that because, like, there's not Crip and Bloods banging that in there? It's all like a bigger umbrella?
No, they so within the black car, you have, you know, Crips and Bloods in different neighborhoods and all that stuff, right? So their stuff transitions to prison from the streets, you know, very similarly to what Northerners do and Southerners do, right? Their politics are different and their routine and their program is different, but that part of it is pretty similar. The issue is if I'm a white dude and I'm a Crip or a Blood or whatever, right, on the streets, and I'm embraced on the streets because I'm from the hood, right? I grew up with the brothers. Right. They know me. It's all good, right? But now I go to prison and the blood, so to speak, you know, I run with a neighborhood of Bloods. Now I go to prison. There's Bloods from all kinds of different neighborhoods. They don't know who I am, right? I'm 99.9% of the time, I'm a nobody in the grand scheme of things. The white boys look and they're like, there's no way in hell that we're going to watch this white dude kick it with these black dudes every day. Right? That's embarrassing to us, right? And I never ran with the Woods, so I can't directly speak for their mindset, I guess, but the perception, the vibe, the general understanding is they hate that stuff, right? Because they're viewed as race traitors. You know, the racial issues between blacks and whites run very, very, very strong. And so they're not going to see that. Well, are all those Bloods, again, it's about respect, are all those Bloods gonna sacrifice for this white dude that they don't know? Are you gonna kick off a race riot? Right. Are you? And even then, the other blacks that are not Bloods, because if it becomes a race riot, it's a race riot, right? You can't say, oh, it's all the white dudes against the Bloods, right? Because the rest of the brothers are gonna be like, no, man, we ain't letting no white dudes come over and stomp on this particular group of black guys, right? And so is the whole black population on the yard willing to go to war and shed blood and sacrifice their parole dates and their packages and their drugs and their visits and their yard time and everything else over this one white dude that pulled up on the yard, and since he grew up in a black neighborhood, he's like, hey, I'm with y'all.
Is he getting X'd out like off the rip?
Very slim chance that dude stays. Now, whether the Woods get him and the blacks are like, man, it's on you, or whether the blacks get rid of him, to, you know, either way. And
he's gonna get rid of one,
right? And that is not in any way like that's not to suggest that the whites are superior to the blacks or that there's this unequal relationship.
Right.
It's just a matter of politics,
Let me
right?
ask you this, bro. When you were in there and you were a Northerner, and I'm sure you guys went to wars with other gangs over your 10-year, sentence. So what was the one gang that like the Northerners were like, bro, do we really want to take it there with them?
To be honest, and this is not an ego thing, none. And that's not to take anything away from those other groups. It's every group's got hitters. Generally speaking, the ones that we would get into it most often was Southerners and whites, right? And so in the racial division of the yard, Northerners and blacks tend to be on one side, Southerners and whites tend to be on the other side, right? And Southerners are predominantly Mexican, though they have some other Latinos and folks sprinkled in. Northerners are predominantly Mexican, though there's some other folks sprinkled in, and then the blacks and the whites are on racial lines. And within the blacks, there's different groups. Within the whites, there's different groups. There's some unaffiliated on both sides, so it's not so cut and dry. And there's been times that the Northerners and the blacks get into it. And I think that's happened a little bit in years since I left, more than it used to. And there's times that Southerners and whites get into it. So it's not perfect. These are not absolute unions. But in my time in there, like Northerners and Southerners would never get together in a conflict with anybody. Northerners and whites would never fight side by side against anybody. Same with Southerners and blacks. Now the prison system in California has changed, and there's everybody out on the yard, and there's this end of hostilities. I still don't think different group segments are cross-aligning for the purposes of combat, but they're coexisting more peacefully. And now every group is really just hurting themselves, cleaning house and getting rid of people. And I see much more violence towards Northerners by Northerners in sanctioned conflicts than I have violence between, other group segments.
Out of your 10 years, man, what was the most violent thing that you remember seeing?
Oh, I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. These white boys actually, in Salinas Valley, level 4 yard, we're going to chow. And so we're in our little group in line, right? And the groups try to kind of line up by race. You're released by building. We try to get in a line in terms of sitting with your own people. And there was some whispers that the white dudes had some issues, amongst themselves. And so it looked a little off, but you just watch. And this guy pulls out with this knife and goes a couple people back and stabs the shit out this dude in his eye, right? Boom. And but it gets better. So this fool that gets stuck in the eye, he has the handle of a piece hanging out of his eye, right? He turns around to the guy behind him. The guy behind him passes him a knife. The guy who originally stabbed him got back in line, moved a couple spaces and kind of got back in line. Mind you, this is not a huge chow hall. This is not like what you see on TV in San Quentin and Folsom, where there's 1,000 people in there, right? And so the COs are everywhere. They're just not really paying attention. And so the dude who got hit in the eye has his knife now. And he scoots up a couple people and starts poking the shit out of the dude who stabbed him in the eye while he has the piece in his eye. And watching that, we were like, ooh. It was comical at first because you have a gallows sense of humor in prison, right? So it's kind of comical, damn, that fool got. Right? Sucks to be him. But then when he came back, it was like, okay, props, right? You wouldn't see that sort of thing amongst Northerners or Southerners very often. Those groups just operate a little bit. The Woods operate a little bit different and the blacks operate a little bit different in how they navigate.
So we're definitely going to have him back on. This is a bunch of crazy stories and we're going to get all into that. I know you, bro, you got a YouTube channel. How can the people find you on YouTube?
Yeah, so it just started recently. It's called The Homie Hangout. And so homie spelled like you see on the shirt, HOMIE. Again, it stands for Helping Others Move in Excellence. So just look up The Homie Hangout. That's where I'm at. And then you could link to The Homie Hangout on Instagram. I'm everywhere under that tag.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to his channel in the description of this video. Go support him. Hit that subscribe button. Before you do, hit the subscribe button on this channel, though. And with that, it's DOC TV, and we're out.